So I'd like to invite our panel to take the stage. I'll do some brief introductory remarks. But I do want to point out that we actually made some TV industry conference news a little earlier today. That was the first time in the history of TV industry conferences that anybody spoke about Jennifer Aniston for 30 minutes and not once mentioned buying her sweater. So that's for the old timers in this crowd. Anyway, that was a great start this morning. I really learned a lot and enjoyed it, but we're into some wonky territory here now, measurement, sorry. But it's important, as Lisa said, and I think you might be surprised with where this panel's going to go. So you know who they are, because you see their names up there, but we have a good representation of agencies and in-house client paid media strategist, specialist. So I think it's a good group to talk about what's going on with measurement. But instead of me framing it, I'd like to throw it to the panel and ask them each to define what they mean by measurement, because as Dave Morgan said this morning, this is a mess. And you know, how you and your organizations look at it and what you're trying to do about it right now. And we could just go ladies first down the road.
Perfect.
Linear, as they say.
And being the linear roots person, but yes, I mean, you guys couldn't have done a better job setting us up for this panel because it's a disaster. I think, you know, having 30 minutes to discuss this, we probably could talk about it for 3 days just talking about measurement. You know, the way we're looking at it at Havas, there's various ways, but trying to pull in just what's going on and trying to find something that can connect all the different touch points and all the different ways you can invest. We've really been leaning into attention as trying to be a baseline in measurement. I think we are living in, you know, a world now where there's a ton of different ways of doing things, a ton of different providers, you know, however you're looking at it across each of the different mediums, and how do you try to find something that, you know, that holy grail we're all looking for to have some sort of sustainable measurement across all the different mediums. So that's where we're really investing a lot of our time in right now, is within intention and attention in terms of measurement.
And I guess as the token or not brand representative, what we focus on ultimately is just the success of our campaigns. Is it our investment, is it getting the performance, the revenue generation that we're really looking forward to? And then how do we measure that to know where we should be shifting budgets around? We're not given, or at least I'm not giving a hard budget, so I have the ability to kind of shift wherever I need to go, but I need to know how successful that is to be able to make that shift.
Yeah, I think for myself, when I think about measurement, I think about meaning and making meaning of the information. You know, marketers need, or businesses need, business intelligence. So for the sake of advertising media, let's call it consumer intelligence. So measurement has to ladder up to a much broader ideal, and information being able to transition itself into teaching a business about the business it's pursuing. And I think we're just caught up in an era where there's a lot of ghost metrics being chased after, applied, that don't have really any application to decisioning. And I think that's the biggest thing about measurement having lost its way. It's not tracking to decisioning. And I obviously agree with Diana talking about the whole idea of, you know, really getting into the attention measurement, because attention really is the only real estate that matters. That's what we're garnering for. Brands are trying to get attention. It's why their platforms are in vogue, and they're why platforms are falling out of vogue. But I think when you look at the idea of garnering attention as the real estate, I think people don't have an idea of what they are measuring and why, and how that ladders up to an even bigger conversation.
Cool. Well, that's a good start. So what I heard in the middle there is you're more focused a little bit on the performance, what it's actually doing for your brand. So it's more of the back end and the results you're getting from that stuff you're doing on the front end.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry.
You got attention.
True enough. It really is kind of the back end, and that is always the hardest part for us. So my band specifically, we're Medtronic. We don't have any hard conversion points. We work in the healthcare space. Privacy, especially the privacy of our patients, is paramount to us. So because of that, we're always in a difficult position. We have no true conversion points. You can't go to the Medtronic website and buy a $350,000, you know, surgical unit. If you want to, talk to me. We can probably find somebody that will help you. But So with that, we have to find other ways of kind of doing that, and it really does kind of come down to the attention. As a brand, I don't care if I reach 1 million people, as long as I reach the 100 right people that are going to be those decision makers and drive the business forward.
Okay, so we have a spectrum here from the very first front end, the data used to plan and buy and project reaching an audience and target them, to the fulfillment of the brand. So that's a lot of territory to cover. I thought it was complicated enough just talking about how you measure the audience estimates, which, as Dave pointed out, is getting more and more complicated. So I have a theory I've been working on for a couple of years now, which is that because we've become so performance-oriented about conversions and getting those results, that maybe we've kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater a little bit. And it's nice that we're doing higher order things like attention. But do you feel like, does that stuff even matter anymore, the front-end audience stuff?
Yeah, I mean, and that's, you know, where we're talking about the attention, we're trying to pull that in from a strategy, a planning, an activation, and a measurement standpoint, so it's straight through. Because, you know, I do think it matters, because, right, you are going after an audience, and we do have a ton of data available to us. And, you know, to your point, does it matter if you reach 100 million people, or if you reach the 10 million people that are actually going to take, you know, I mean, I was just joking about it before. Like, we had a client back in the day, and I was like, you ROI'd yourself into bankruptcy, right? Like, it was just like, it depends what you are focusing on. And, you know, your ROI number for long tail cable can look great, but is anyone actually watching your commercial? Is anyone paying attention to it? Is anyone understanding that message? Or is it a $4 CPM that looks good on a piece of paper, but you're not driving anything? And then you talk about the measurement results of, you know, on the back end of everything. That, to me, is where, you know, all of this needs to get pieced together and come to, because there's just so many different ways of looking at it. So yes, when we do talk about attention, super important, and audience is very important to us. But again, I mean, even it's not one size fits all, right? You know, the way you're working with some of your you know, on a health end of things is not the way you're going to be working with QSR. So I think there's just so much out there. I think we all know that. I think we're all living through, you know, the chaos of it all. But I think every piece is important. It just depends. You have to put a little bit of a stake on what you think is more important than the others, because otherwise we're just going to continue chasing and chasing, because there's just so much available out there to us.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said, because I think some people just don't understand the business they're in.
Yep.
And it's like, you don't just do it because everyone's doing it or it's the new thing that's in vogue. You really have to understand how your brand participates in a marketplace and how consumers come inbound to make a decision, to make choices. Because, yeah, we joked about it on our prep call. The average marketer knows their growth goals. It's like 5–10%. What's 1 billion impressions? No market on the planet can increase manufacturing 100x to meet your 1 billion impressions. They all know a real number, and that real number is probably in the tens of thousands or 1 million. It's not in the hundreds of millions. So that's just like a fake number that's on a piece of paper that allows the sell-through approach, that further reiterates that a lot of people are in the B2B business. You're trying to make a media partner or agency happy. You're not in the B2B to C business, where a marketer's like, all I care about is the consumer. You can all go. At the end of the day, the average client doesn't make TV shows. They make a product. So they don't make apps. They make a product. I mean, they may have an app to support that, but I think people just don't understand and haven't spent enough time understanding the business model that a client is actually executing against and measuring the things that matter to make them smarter, to go make more money, to then increase manufacturing or whatever particular output. So it's laughable to see that even in this era, we're in the era of the machines, AI, and now we're going to get into measuring where people actually saw the commercial. And TV is how many, 50, 60 years old? I don't even know. It started before I was born. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I just don't understand how we're now going to walk back decades to fix something that really was table stakes. You shouldn't be running any media or execution if you actually don't know if there's attention on it whatsoever. Go do something else. I just, mom and pops executed better with Google search ads and some of these companies with billions of dollars running it through a series of platforms. So some of it is just the intentionality is lacking in showing up in market and studying who you're trying to sell to, that it actually matters and makes a difference.
And then real quick to add to that, as a brand, knowing what your actual end goal is. We all talk about our media plans, our media mixes, but what is the actual business goal and the business strategy that is going to that? Because if you don't have that, if a marketer can't tell you that at a brand, as an agency, you shouldn't work with them. But on my side, like if an agency doesn't understand what I'm trying to tell them, what our business strategy is, I don't want to work with you either. So.
Fair point.
I think it was the 1930s World's Fair that Roosevelt launched it, and then it was delayed by World War II.
Like I said, I knew it wasn't alive yet.
So those metrics, those currency numbers, those audience estimates are still important because you need them to benchmark and get to things like ROAS and things like that. But are they less important now? That's what I'm trying to get at. Because there's a lot of noise being made, certainly in the trade press and Media Post and other places, about how important all this currency confusion is right now. What I mean by that is, like, if it's that hard, and you have, think about direct response television, which existed for half a century. Those guys liked having the Nielsen numbers up front, but what they cared about was that the 800 numbers or the websites were getting clicks, you know. Are we moving more into that orientation is what I'm asking.
I'll take a swing at it. I think, you know, the thing when I said we're walking back 20 years to fix a problem we should have nailed years ago, you now have the interest of computer vision that's going to be very disruptive in measuring biometrics and human actual response, because 90% of what you say without opening your mouth. So Realize It is one company that actually can measure ad effectiveness. Sat on a great webinar actually with Nexen, Lumen, and T-Vision, where optimization on supply path is going to be based on real human response. Doesn't really matter what your traditional ad testing or your click rate is. It's basically going to measure human response to ad exposure to decide where those ads should be running. It's not going to matter what you come forth with as a media plan or your preferences, or you like this company's upfronts, blah, 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 blah. The data is going to say ads should be running here based on computer vision's data path, and that's going to be the ultimate supply path optimization. So while people are trying to figure out, are they watching it, AI is going to be like, this is the only thing you should be doing and executing to get your return. So it's just going to jump the shark while everybody's fixing a 1990s problem. I mean, it's humorous, but when you sit there and look at it, the advancements have come so fast and they're just going to get faster. I don't know what the rest of the industry actually thinks it's doing by spending time circling a drain over here, and computer vision is Mr. Plumber is just going to have the bottom fall out.
All right, so let's get into that a little bit. I mean, with computer vision, you mentioned Lumen and some other companies. I think Havas is working with Lumen. There's a lot of players there too. It's not just Nielsen that's facing a lot of competition. How hard is it when you don't have a single industry standard? I remember starting out in the 80s, there were two TV measurement firms, Arbitron and Nielsen, and that was confusing. So now we have a multitude of audience factors, and it's not just attention. You're also looking at carbon impact and DEI and other initiatives. It's complicated, as Dave said.
Yeah, I mean, it's very complicated, and there is so much available out there, and I think that's where, you know, again, back to having a focus of what are you focusing on, because there's just too much. You can't do it all. You can't optimize toward 10 different KPIs, right? You have to kind of lean in to figuring out what's important to you. So when we're talking about, you know, like, you know, net neutral carbon, and we're talking about D&I, we at Havas, we've built what we call a meaningful marketplace, and that's where we're working with, you know, whether it's, you know, folks that are selling inventory, or if it's folks that have a product, right? Like we're categorizing all that and going to our clients and allowing them to, you know, just fully understand and have a breadth of different providers, whatever it is that they're looking to do, to lean into. And then you talk about, you know, the Nielsen's of the world, that now we have Nielsen and VideoAmp and iSpot and ComScore, right? And there's that whole world that we're dealing with there in terms of that standard measurement that we all, you know, whether we knew and loved it or just knew it, was Nielsen, but we had a common denominator. And now, you know, that coupled with walled gardens and, you know, just having that full funnel of a, you know, a omni-channel plan, where is that focus? Where are you leaning into? You know, where do you put your, you know, take your bets? You know, my favorite question to continue asking is, who's paying for all this? Nobody seems to want to answer me that question. I'm sure somewhere in my CPM I'll be paying for it, but you know, it's just, there's a lot out there, and, you know, to figure out where you're going to focus on. I think that, you know, to the point you guys were making earlier, like, that is a super important conversation to have with the client at the beginning stages, because otherwise you can do whatever you want to do in terms of your strategy, your planning, your buying, your measurement, and you're never going to get the results that you're looking to do, which is move your product, right? Whatever that product might be.
Well, and I also think too, like from a planning perspective, not having that common denominator, and on top of which, with the lack of transparency you were talking about earlier this morning, not being able to trust the numbers, the data that I'm being given, knowing somebody somewhere is lying to me because all of this can't possibly be true. I mean, Medtronic is a huge company. We have a lot of people working for us, but I doubt that 1 billion people watch our videos. Just, we're not that interesting.
Do you have any proprietary biometric data?
Yes.
Okay, maybe at our next conference you'll announce something. Yeah, so what good are any of your numerators if you don't have a common denominator?
Well, I think it's unique to each business. You know, in my history of representing automotive QSRs, they don't look at media reports. They have a totally different set of metrics. There's based upon localized information on foot traffic, walk-ins, revenue per customer, et cetera, et cetera. They look at our stuff and like, what does that even mean? And they each go back to their reporting. You have to start to align measurement and advertising media that's closely matched to how they measure their business. The dealer business, they have closed sales reporting. Shows the closed sales for each of the month. That's what they live by. And all the mechanisms which they made money, from walk-in to referrals to your cousin sent somebody to come buy a car to this came through search, social, whatever. They look at that. You got to make sure media maps that inflow opportunity. And QSRs are even more religious about it in terms of really knowing who's in their backyard because there's so many of them. Like, that's the business intelligence they use that guides them. An agency and media partner should be trying to develop a metric or measurement framework that maps on top of that. Not just taking what the industry throws out and says, do this. And I think what you start to realize is every business is so highly individualized in how they make money and monitor cash flow. So I like the Havas idea of having kind of a center of excellence to educate on all the spectrum of measurement that's out there so clients can get educated. It's kind of like establishing the rules of engagement. And then taking to each individualized business and said, okay, so what should be the measurement model that matters based upon how this company makes and loses money? I think the average person in the business just doesn't understand how their client makes and loses money. Because if you make the money, they'll keep you forever. If you lose them, you get fired. It doesn't really matter how many gross rating points or how many upfront parties you went to.
I love that. So shouldn't we just move to a yield management system? Why are we doing any of this?
We need jobs. We need jobs.
I forgot, right. So, I had a theory when I started covering this business that, Madison Avenue worked like Wall Street, and it was open market supply and demand. And the more I got into it, the more I realized, no, it's really people trying to do closet deals, get an advantage over the competition. And I think having a common standard like Nielsen was not in the best interest of the sell side. I was shocked to see it was not in the best interest of the buy side and how agencies got behind the JIC and all that stuff, and wanted to create obfuscation and confusion by lots of multiple currencies. And this is my question, which is, do we really want to be that transparent publicly, or is it just better for us to have our secret sauces clandestinely?
Well, I would say this. This is the beauty of advertising. It's the only business where legally you can gain a strategic competitive advantage over a competitor. Everything else you're probably doing is illegal. And in most other industries, it is illegal. So there's a lot of power and possibility there. I think it's just poorly exercised and executed and not well read and researched to make those outcomes come to fruition. And there are companies who've done it well, but there are a lot of them who just kind of do it poorly. They just happen to make a great product, and they still make revenue, despite the marketing. So I think that's just kind of my perception. There's so much possibility there, but there's just not a lot of diligence in the thinking that you see in other industries like pharmaceutical or banking, where the barrier is very high. Everyone needs to be pretty smart, and the price you pay for poor execution could mean the downfall of a multi-billion-dollar organization. This industry is like kids with too many credit cards with high balances. We just kind of do a lot of stuff instead of like being on the wealth management train. We're out living the life, and sometimes that means living the lie.
And I would say too, like the idea of transparency, of understanding this, of it being fully open, it it becomes less than about how much money can you spend, how many different channels can you invest in, and really becomes more about the story as a brand that I'm trying to tell. We're trying to make these products that are potentially saving people's lives. That's a very powerful story, but if I have to worry more about the channel, if I have to worry more about the budget that I have to spend and less about that story, it's always going to be less effective for me.
Okay. I think we have time for audience questions if anybody has any. So there's one in the back there, but while you're getting there, just let me throw one at you. So why are we still using the John Wanamaker quote? I mean, Dave Morgan was talking about Oracle's ability to guess our gender right 50% of the time. We're still at the halfway mark. I mean, with all this science and engineering, why are we only as good as a crapshoot?
I mean, you know, I think go back, what, 2-3 years ago when all of the different measurement alt currency came out, you know, we were told at that point, you know, get on board now, right? Get on board. And being the, you know, I guess cynical buyer inside of me, I'm like, absolutely not. Are you crazy? You know, like there's so much that we don't know. There's so much, and we try to move things so quickly because we do have the ability in the world we live in and with all the technology, but to move it just because we can versus getting it right. And I think that's a little bit of the push-pull where as far forward as we go, we kind of take a couple of steps back when you start asking all of those questions. And, you know, there was something rooted in there that worked, right? I mean, there's been advertising for many, many years, and we know that it helps sell products. So it's finding that balance of the advancements in the tech that we have and all these other options, but understanding like you have to at some point have a core that works, and it's not just smoke and mirrors, and it's not just the next thing so that we have a new panel topic to talk about, right? There's a lot of money that we all control in this room, and there needs to be some sort of accountability versus just jumping to the next.
Hi, morning. Ryan Spicer from Atmosphere. First, Albert, this is awkward. I have that outfit planned for tomorrow, so let's roll with it tomorrow when I wear it.
It's a good thing you didn't wear it today.
Yeah.
That would have been embarrassing.
Yes. So a couple times already this morning we've talked about optimizing towards the wrong things. And going back to your quote, Albert, about making people money, my question for you guys is how do you parse out and prioritize in a world of things that are going to make money in the long term versus things that are going to make money in the short term, right? Optimizing towards things that you know might work, but you know are gravitating towards the bottom and not really creating a new pool of potential customers. And ones, you know, particularly in an auto space where you know that customer is only a potential customer for short moments in their life cycle.
For me, it's relatively easy because everyone is a potential patient for Medtronic. Like everyone could potentially need a Medtronic device, so we are always kind of thinking the long term. We don't tend to think short term. I mean, and when I'm thinking about talking to my actual healthcare providers, that's always a long-term investment because this is something that's going to take them a while to decide to invest in. It is not a small upfront cost to them, so it's just a long cycle by nature. So I have to think long term.
Yeah, I think I would start with how you set the frame. Most people don't get to make fast money. Money tends to come slow. It was interesting, and I appreciate the question from Atmosphere, one of our partners. When I first started looking at digital out-of-home, because I was not an out-of-home fan, I set the frame for the clients about what it meant as a lost customer view when they leave the house. What are they going to see? Out-of-home advertising. It's pretty simple. So when you sell it like that, clients are like, okay, well, is it acceptable for you to lose sight of the consumer because they left the house? Every brand would say no. I'm said, okay, well, we're going to recapture it through digital out-of-home. They're like, okay, let's do that. And then I spent time coaching and teaching while I had to wait for the business case and the metrics to roll up. Because optimization is not really minute by minute. It's really quarter by quarter, year by year. It takes time. And you have to convince clients and brands it's going to take time, but you have to educate the value exchange you're going to get all the way through. So early stages, learning about the customer. That's why you can't not teach them in the early going. Otherwise, they'll just tap out and start removing money. And I think that's how you get brands on frame with new opportunities, new ideals, and particularly where measurement is all they're focused on is you have to educate through the process as to the long view and end game, and then they'll be patient enough to kind of stay with you. And I think in my career, that's what's worked and I do a lot of multicultural, so when you sell things to people to understand digital and multicultural, You have to set the frame properly on the entire conversation as to where it's going to take the business and take the brand, so they stay patient while they wait for the money to show up as lift or opportunity or revenue return or what have you. But I feel like if they're imparted with knowledge along the way, they will stay on the pursuit with you. And I think that's the problem when you give them metrics that don't mean anything. So you're not teaching them, and they're like, well, we're not seeing results, we're out. And brands do that all the time because brands are constantly moving money. And they're moving money and not telling you, even telling the agency. So when they tell you, oh, we had to budget cuts, no, you just thought what we were doing sucked, and you decided that 3 months ago.
I'd be honest with you.
Right. We had this joke because he's like, I feel bad, I'm that guy. Like, you have to be that guy. But that's in a Havas world, it's the same thing. I mean, even when agencies lose an account, oh, this one was cheaper by $1. No, what you were doing wasn't working. They decided 6 months ago to move the money. So you have to look at setting up the frame, i.e. the education of what consumer intelligence they're going to gain, while you wait for all the results they want that really proves this out to sort of show up.
Anyone else? All right. Well, you guys were awesome. Oops.
Can I
Whoops.
take a selfie?
Oh. Hold off.